The Deerclops is the original giant from Vanilla. It makes its appearance again in ROG, representing Winter of the 4 seasonal giants. As one of the strongest mobs in the game, you'll need to be prepared and take great caution when dealing with it. This episode will break down the preparation, combat, and aftermath of the Deerclops. Like most giants, the Deerclops will usually appear in the last few days of the season. If this is your first winter, it should appear around day 31 to 36. Its spawn, both whether or not it appears and when it does, is not guaranteed, especially in early seasons, but you should still be wary of it. At that point in the season, just hover around your base and work on more local jobs, like base building, farming birds, and whatever else is in your home biome. Prepare food, weapons, and armor in advance, preferably by day 30 or around 10 days into winter. You'll need a variety of different items for healing all of your stats. Healing salves, honey poultice, jerky, cactus flesh, meatballs, basically whatever you can get your hands on. Fights can be long and painful. Have a strong weapon like a tentacle spike or fresh ham bat. Bring a football helmet and a log suit. Then bring another one, just in case. This may seem excessive, but for newer players, you can never be too careful. When you get more comfortable with the game and how to deal with the Deerclops, you can slowly shed some of those excess inventory slots. Also, make sure you have a campfire pre-built. You may need the heat. Near the end of winter, pay attention to sound cues. The Deerclops' heavy breathing acts as a warning. The moment you hear it, grab your stuff and leave your base. You'll want to be at least 3 to 4 screens away from your base, more if you want to be safe. Designate a location for the spawn of the Deerclops. This will be your battlefield. Choose your battlefield intelligently. Make sure it's a biome that you've already finished exploring. Once you have your battlefield selected, drop a campfire and light it to full, keeping your temperature up. When the Deerclops spawns, it'll be within 2 screens of your character. If it's not close enough to aggro onto you, it'll wander around, which is why it's important to be at least 3 to 4 screens away from your base. Its highest aggro priority is on the player and structures. You need to make sure it's aggroed onto you. If it's targeting a structure or other mobs in the area, it may become more difficult to control the parameters of the fight. This will likely require you to hunt the monster down. If you start hearing the Deerclops' attack sound, an ice effect that kinda sounds like glass shattering, or if you hear its footsteps along with the screen rumbling, you're going in the right direction. Get close to it and draw its aggro. It'll usually switch to you if there are no other priority targets in range, and if it's not in combat. If it doesn't, you can always smack it with a boomerang or blow dart to get its attention if you have those available. Once you grab its attention, you can begin the combat phase. There are a lot of different methods to your combat approach against the Deerclops. Here are some of my preferred ones. Smacking it and kiting it around is the most basic way to fight it, but it's still very effective, and it's my most preferred method of combat against the Deerclops. You can safely get 3 attacks in between each of the Deerclops attacks, but if you're not confident, 2 hits is fine. Don't be deceived by its attack animation. Despite the large AoE animation, the ice particles do not accurately match its attack range. It's a lot shorter than it looks. If you're not familiar with its range, it's a good idea to test your limits and see how close you can get before it actually connects with the hit. Once you figure out its true range, kiting it becomes a lot easier. Offensively, the Deerclops is tied as being the weakest giant, dealing only 75 base damage to the player. But since you should be wearing armor, it'll never do that much to you. The reason why melee kiting is quite effective against the Deerclops is because of its relatively low health. It's the most frail giant in the game, at only 2000 HP, making it a lot more manageable than some of the other giants. Because the duration of the fight is generally lower, you'll suffer less sanity loss from its insanity aura, which can deplete all of your sanity in less than a minute. When using the melee kiting strategy, your battlefield of choice matters very little. As long as you have the area explored, you're clear of other hazards, and you're not boxed in by anything, it'll suffice since you're not moving around too much, just back and forth movements from kiting. Most mobs in the game will fall against the Deerclops. Its attacks apply a frost effect similar to ice hounds when they die, freezing mobs in place until they're broken up by another attack, essentially giving the Deerclops an additional attack for free. Combine that with its AoE damage, and even a herd of beefalo or a flock of tall birds will get destroyed. Pigs, bunnymen, and spiders are even worse against the Deerclops. Tentacles are decent due to their damage and tankiness. McTusk can kite it, which can be pretty amusing and effective if it doesn't get stuck somewhere. But the most effective mob to use against it is the Tree Guard. During the spawning phase, make sure you select a forest biome as your battlefield, preferably a massive one with a lot of evergreen trees instead of lumpy ones. Evergreen trees drop pine cones, allowing you to replace the inevitably destroyed trees. This strategy involves dragging the Deerclops through the biome and letting it trample over as many trees as possible. Make sure the Deerclops is actually directly walking over the trees. After it destroys a decent amount of trees, tree guards will spawn around it and aggro the Deerclops. Since the Deerclops should still be aggroed onto you, you'll need to stall it for the tree guards to catch up. Keep stalling the Deerclops by walking into its range and forcing it to attack you. Tree guards will slowly catch up to it and attack it. Once they're fighting each other, all you need to do is sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Normally it takes at least 2 large tree guards to kill the Deerclops without player intervention. This strategy is more about the loot than anything else, or if you're just not comfortable with kiting it yet. The trees trampled can yield a massive amount of logs without you having to lift a finger, making it a highly efficient farming method. However, the RNG factors of spawning tree guards can be troublesome. Sometimes they spawn instantly, sometimes they spawn after a full day of felled trees. When they spawn, you might only get 1 small tree guard, or you might get 3 large ones. You won't know until it happens. It's a good idea to carry around a lot of food and ways to keep warm because you may be dragging around the Deerclops for a while. This strategy actually becomes more efficient in subsequent winters after the first, because the spawn rate of tree guards will increase over time. Blow darts deal 100 damage each when used by a normal damage modifier character, so 20 will fell the beast. If this is your first winter, it's highly unlikely you have 20 blow darts, but any number of blow darts will chunk the Deerclop's health. This is the cleanest method for killing it, but it's quite expensive. I would only recommend this strategy if you have a lot of blow darts to spare, because the Deerclops is a relatively easy boss to kill. Blow darts are much more efficient against the Dragonfly, Bearger, or Ancient Guardian. All these mobs are statistically stronger than the Deerclops and can be trickier to deal with. Gunpowder is expensive and risky, but extremely powerful. They do 200 damage, which means that 10 of them will kill the Deerclops. However, because Gunpowder deals fire-based damage, and the Deerclops has flammable loot, you don't want to use Gunpowder to deal the finishing blow. Instead, use 9 to deal 1800 damage, and make up the 200 damage difference through other means. Make sure you don't kill it while it's still burning. This strategy involves you dropping the Gunpowder on the ground and lighting it on fire with a torch. After a short delay, it'll explode and deal damage in a small area around it. This means that the Deerclops must essentially be on top of the Gunpowder to take damage from it. You'll need to have excellent timing, making sure that it walks over the Gunpowder when it explodes, or use sleep and freeze to keep it in place before lighting the Gunpowder. It may take some practice to get the timing down, but this is the fastest way to kill the Deerclops when done right. However, similar to the blow dart strategy, it's highly recommended you save Gunpowder for more threatening mobs like the Dragonfly, Bearger, and Ancient Guardian. Gimmicky strategies like lighting it on fire and slowly burning it to death are not recommended. It just wastes too much time. The old bell can work, but I personally wouldn't recommend it, since it's like a less reliable version of the Gunpowder strategy. You're basically forced to use sleep or freeze, but even then, you may have to use the old bell more than once because of its unreliable damage. If you do have to do it more than once, you may be forced to use even more freeze and sleep based items. Alternatively, it is possible to avoid it by moving at least 2 screens away from it. As long as you don't move within 2 screens of it, it won't be active. If you do intend to do this, make sure you're significantly farther away from your base than you normally would be when preparing to engage it in combat. That way, you don't accidentally reactivate it by moving around your base. If you do avoid killing it, you're missing out on rare loot, so only do so if you're completely unprepared or overwhelmed by its spawn. Upon death, the Deerclops drops 8 meat and 1 Deerclops eyeball. The meat is delicious. The eyeball is a bit less delicious. It's a meat item that never spoils, and eating it restores 60 HP and 75 hunger, but will lower your sanity by 15. However, eating it should only be a last resort, or if you have a collection of eyeballs already. The eyeball is used to make the Eyebrella, an incredible hat that gives you immunity to wetness and lightning, and also gives you overheat resistance, making it one of the most powerful items in the game for spring, and a great item for summer. Once the Deerclops is dead, you're basically free to do whatever you want for the rest of the season. However, there is one other factor to consider: spring preparation, specifically the Moose Goose spawning. While most giants spawn near the end of the season, the Moose Goose spawns in the beginning of the season. This means that it's possible to have 2 giants spawning within 5 days of each other, so make sure you're prepared for the potential of that happening. I hope this episode at least gets you part of the way to becoming a seasoned Deerclops hunter, and once you get more comfortable with killing it, try out new methods for fun. Keep working on your technique through failures. Everything is a learning experience, and eventually, you won't even bat an eye when the Deerclops tries to ruin your snowy winter day. As always, thanks for watching, and don't starve.